The name itself has become a weapon. Machiavellian. It is one of the few proper names in the dictionary that serves as an insult. We use it to describe psychopaths, corporate manipulators, and House of Cards villains. For 500 years, history has labeled this man the teacher of evil, the devil who whispered in the ears of tyrants. The reaction to his work was immediate and hysterical. The Catholic Church banned the prince for 200 years, placing it on the Index Librorum Prohibitorum. The Jesuits called him the devil's partner. Shakespeare called him the murderous Machiavel to the world. He is the architect of the darker arts, how to lie, cheat, and murder your way to the throne. But here is the strange, uncomfortable truth. Niccolò Machiavelli was not a prince. He was not a tyrant. He wasn't even a particularly powerful man. He was a mid-level bureaucrat in the Florentine Republic, a clerk, a patriot who failed at almost everything he tried to do and who died penniless and disgraced. So why does this failed diplomat still haunt our nightmares? Why is this little pamphlet written in a dusty farmhouse 500 years ago still the secret operating manual for modern power? From the Kremlin to Wall Street, the prince is still being read. It scares us because it breaks the oldest rule of society. Most philosophers, from Plato to Cicero, tell us how the world ought to be. They paint seductive pictures of justice, fairness, and utopia. They tell us that if we are good, we will be safe. They lie to us. Machiavelli was the first person in history to stop pretending. He looked at the ugly, bloody machinery of human nature, and he wrote down exactly how it works. He didn't write about moral virtue. He wrote about effectual truth, what actually happens when the swords are drawn. He didn't invent the game of power. He just printed the rule book. And we hate him for it because he forces us to look in the mirror and see the beast staring back. He reveals that civilization is just a thin veneer over our primal instincts. Today, we are going to open that rulebook. We are going to strip away the myth of the cartoon villain and look at the cold science of power. We will explore the brutality of Cesare Borgia, the cunning of the fox, and the economy of violence. This is not an endorsement of cruelty. It is an autopsy of reality. Whether you want to lead a country, manage a team, or just understand why your boss is a sociopath, you cannot afford to be naive. You need to understand the mechanics before they crush you. Welcome to the world of the prince. To understand the book, you must understand the desperation behind it. The year is 1513. Florence, the republic which Machiavelli served faithfully for 14 years, has fallen. The Medici family has stormed back into power with the help of Spanish bayonets and papal gold. Machiavelli is on the wrong side of history. He is fired, stripped of his post, but it gets worse. A conspiracy is uncovered against the Medici, and although he is innocent, Machiavelli's name is found on a list of potential sympathizers. He is dragged to the Bargello prison. He is thrown into a dungeon, and then he is tortured. They use the strappado. It is a horrific method, hands tied behind the back, hoisted into the air by the wrists, and dropped. He endures 4 drops. His shoulders are dislocated. He is left hanging there for hours, screaming in agony. Yet miraculously, he does not confess. He maintains his innocence. Because he has nothing to confess, he survives the ordeal. Eventually, part of a general amnesty, he is released, but he is banished. He is forced to retreat to his small family farm in San Castiano, miles away from the city he loves. For a man of action, this silence is worse than death. His life is over. He writes to a friend about his pathetic daily routine. He spends his days catching thrushes with glue traps. He argues with local butchers over the price of wood just to pass the time. He plays cards in a sticky tavern with peasants shouting and swearing over pennies. He feels his brilliant mind rotting away in the mud. He is a political genius with no one to talk to. But when night falls, everything changes. In a famous letter, he describes his ritual. When evening comes, I return home and enter my study. On the threshold, I take off my workday clothes, covered in mud and dirt, and I put on the garments of court and palace. Dressed like a diplomat once more, he sits at his desk and communes with the ancients. He speaks with Livy, Cicero, and the Roman emperors. He asks them the secret of their power. He forgets his poverty, he forgets his pain, and from these nightly conversations, he distills a small pamphlet. It is a job application. He intends to send it to Lorenzo de' Medici, the nephew of the Pope, to prove that he is useful. To prove that he knows how kings are made. To really see why this book was a revolution, you have to look at the library shelf it landed on. In the Renaissance, there was a popular genre of books called mirrors for princes. These were the self-help books for royalty. These were polite, pious guidebooks written by bishops and philosophers. They told kings that power came from God, and to keep it, they just had to be good. Be honest, be merciful, be a good Christian. If you are virtuous, the people will love you, and your enemies will respect you. It was a beautiful fantasy, a fairy tale for adults. It assumed that the political world functioned on the same moral laws as a Sunday school. But Machiavelli had seen war. He had seen the Borgias. He knew this was a lie. So he takes this fantasy and smashes it with a sledgehammer. He writes, "There is such a gap between how one lives and how one should live, that he who neglects what is being done for what should be done will learn his destruction rather than his preservation." This is the core of his philosophy. He calls it la verità effettual, the effectual truth. He is not interested in the imagination of the thing, but the truth of the thing. Not what you wish would happen, but what actually happens. He argues that a man who tries to be good all the time in a world where so many are not good will simply be eaten alive. If you play by the rules of chess while your opponent is boxing, you will lose. Imagine a CEO today who refuses to fire incompetent employees because he wants to be merciful. The company fails. Everyone loses their job. Was that mercy, or was it negligence? Machiavelli would call it a sin of weakness. Machiavelli separates politics from ethics. He treats the state like a body that needs surgery. He is the first political scientist. He observes that sometimes, to save the patient from gangrene, you have to cut off a limb. It's ugly, it hurts, it is morally repugnant, but it works. And for Machiavelli, in the game of survival, working is the only metric that matters. This sets the stage for his entire theory of leadership. If you want to enter the ring, you must leave your sainthood at the door. But if the world is a chaotic, amoral place, can we really control anything? This brings us to the two great engines that drive Machiavelli's universe: Fortuna and Virtù. This is the struggle between human will and random chance. Fortuna is luck, it is fate, it is the circumstances you are born into. Machiavelli says that Fortuna controls about half of our actions, but she leaves the other half to us. He compares her to a raging river. When the river floods, it is terrifying. It destroys trees, buildings, and soil. Everyone flees before it. No one can stop its raw power. In Machiavelli's time, people would look at such a disaster and say, "It is God's will," and they would surrender. But Machiavelli says, no. This is where Virtù comes in. Now be careful. Virtù does not mean virtue in the modern Christian sense. It doesn't mean being nice or fair or moral. It comes from the Latin word vir, meaning man. Virtus is martial ability. It is energy, skill, strength, and the ruthless will to power. It is the ability to look at the chaos and impose your order upon it. It is the spirit of the Roman warrior. You cannot stop the river when it is already flooding. But Machiavelli argues, when the weather is calm, men of Virtù make preparations. They build dikes. They build dams. They dig canals. They prepare for the disaster before it happens. So when the flood comes, and it will always come, the water is channeled. It flows where you want it to flow. It turns your water wheels instead of destroying your home. This is the secret of leadership. A bad leader blames bad luck. A Machiavellian leader assumes that bad luck is inevitable and prepares the infrastructure to handle it. Strategy is the art of damming the river of fate. Machiavelli famously wrote that fortune is a woman, and to be mastered, she must be treated aggressively. It's a controversial, sexist image typical of his time, but the philosophical point is clear. Passive people get crushed. Audacity wins. Virtù is the violence we do to fate to make it submit to our will. It is the refusal to be a victim of circumstance. Theory is useless without evidence. So Machiavelli gives us a concrete case study. He introduces us to the man he admired most during his diplomatic missions, the illegitimate son of the Pope, the Duke, Cesare Borgia. Borgia had conquered the region of Romagna in Italy, but he had a massive problem. The region was lawless. Robbery, feuds, and riots were everywhere. The previous rulers had been weak and corrupt, profiting from the chaos rather than governing. Borgia knew he needed to restore order to make the state productive, but he didn't want to get his own hands dirty and make the people hate him. So, he hired a man named Ramiro d'Orco, a cruel, efficient, and vicious man. He gave him absolute power. Ramiro did exactly what he was hired to do. In a few months, he pacified the region using torture, executions, and terror. The crime stopped. The bandits were dead. The region was safe. But the people hated Ramiro with a passion. Borgia knew that this hatred could eventually turn against him. He had to show the people that the cruelty wasn't his fault, but the fault of his nasty minister. He needed to separate himself from the violence he had authorized. He planned a grand finale. One cold morning, the people of the town of Cesena woke up and walked to the main square. There, they found a horrific theatrical sight that Machiavelli never forgot. Ramiro d'Orco was lying on the ground. He had been cut in two, his body in one piece, his head on a wooden block. Beside him was a bloody knife. No trial, no explanation. Just a brutal display of justice. Machiavelli writes that this spectacle left the people at once satisfied and stupefied. Borgia had used the man to do the dirty work, then killed the man to win the people's favor. He was both the arsonist and the firefighter. This is the brutal calculus of the prince. Cruelty, when used well, solves the problem. If Borgia had been merciful and let the bandits roam, the riots would have continued, and thousands would have died. By killing one man, he saved the state. It is cold. It is terrifying. But Machiavelli asks the uncomfortable question, was it wrong, or was it necessary? How does a leader pull off such a complex psychological trick? Machiavelli says you cannot just be a man, restricted by human laws. You must be able to act like a beast. Specifically, he uses the ancient metaphor of the centaur half-man, half-beast. Among the beasts, you must choose two, the lion and the fox. The lion is raw strength. It can fight off wolves. It frightens the enemy. But the lion is stupid. It falls into traps. It doesn't see the snares hidden in the grass. The fox is different. The fox is weak. It cannot fight the wolves, but the fox is cunning. It can spot the traps and avoid them. It knows how to dig, how to hide, and how to outsmart the hunter. A prince must be both. If you are only a lion, you get trapped by conspiracies. If you are only a fox, you get eaten by stronger armies. You need the strength to terrify and the mind to deceive. This leads to Machiavelli's most controversial piece of advice, the one that truly earned him the title of Teacher of Evil. He says, do not keep your promises. He argues that a prudent ruler cannot and must not honor his word when it places him at a disadvantage. Why? If all men were good, this precept would not be good. But because they are wretched, and they would not keep their word to you, you do not have to keep yours to them. It is a preemptive strike against betrayal. You have to lie better than they do. You have to be a great pretender. Politics is theater, and you are the lead actor. But here is the key. You must appear to be virtuous. You must look merciful, faithful, humane, upright, and religious. The mask is more important than the face. Being religious is good for optics. Actually, being religious is a handicap. Why? Because everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The crowd judges by their eyes. They are easily fooled by appearances and results. If you win, the means will always be judged honorable. This is the fox in action. The ability to simulate virtue while doing what is necessary. It is the ultimate hypocrisy. And Machiavelli argues, it is the ultimate survival strategy in a wicked world. This brings us to the most difficult concept in the book, the one that earns Machiavelli his dark reputation: the economy of violence. Most moral systems tell us that violence is always evil. Machiavelli disagrees. He treats violence like a surgeon treats a scalpel. He distinguishes between cruelty well used and cruelty badly used. It sounds horrific to our modern ears, but follow his logic. Cruelty well used is done all at once. It is a single, decisive stroke to secure one's position. Think of Ogadocles the Sicilian. He gathered all the senators and rich citizens for a meeting, and at a signal his soldiers killed them all. It was brutal. It was criminal. But the next day, the city was his. The chaos ended. No more blood needed to be spilled. Machiavelli argues, injuries must be done altogether so that being tasted less, they offend less. If you rip the band-aid off quickly, the pain is sharp, but the memory fades. Compare this to cruelty badly used. This is the leader who is afraid to be harsh. He starts with small punishments. He hesitates. But as threats grow, he is forced to be cruel again and again and again. The violence becomes chronic. It poisons the state. The people live in constant fear, never knowing when the next blow will fall. This, Machiavelli says, is true tyranny. The paradox is uncomfortable. The humane leader who hesitates eventually causes more death and instability than the cruel leader who acts decisively. The squeamish surgeon kills the patient by operating too slowly. But he adds a second rule. Benefits should be granted little by little, so that they may be better enjoyed. Good news should be drip-fed. Promotions, bonuses, reforms, spread them out. It is a cynical manipulation of human psychology. Pain is best experienced in a flash. Pleasure is best experienced in slow motion. If you must take power, do the ugly work immediately. Consolidate your control. Then sheathe the sword and start handing out the bread. But once you have power, how should the people feel about you? This leads to the most famous debate in political history. Is it better to be loved or feared? Ideally, you want both. But Machiavelli, the pragmatist, knows that is rare. So he chooses. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Why? Because of his low opinion of you, of me, of all of us. He writes, men are ungrateful, fickle, pretenders, avoiders of danger, and greedy for gain. While you treat them well, they are yours. They offer you their blood, their property, their lives, as long as the need is far away. But when danger approaches, they revolt. Love is held by a chain of obligation which, because men are wicked, is broken at every chance for their own self-interest. Fear is different. Fear is supported by the dread of punishment, which never leaves you. You can stop loving a leader, but you cannot stop fearing the prison cell. Fear is a control mechanism you hold. Love is a control mechanism they hold. However, and this is the part everyone forgets, Machiavelli issues a massive warning. The prince must make himself feared in such a way that if he does not gain love, he at least avoids hatred. Fear and hatred are not the same. Fear makes people obey. Hatred makes people reckless. Hatred creates assassins. If the people hate you, no fortress can protect you. So how do you avoid hatred? Machiavelli's answer is cynical, dark comedy. He says, keep your hands off their property and their women, but mostly the property. He writes, A man will forget the death of his father sooner than the loss of his patrimony. It is a brutal insight. People can forgive execution, but they will never forgive confiscation. This is the razor's edge of leadership. You must be strong enough to be feared, but disciplined enough not to be a predator. It requires a mastery of self that few leaders possess. So, what do we do with the prince in the 21st century? We like to think we have evolved past this. We live in democracies. We have HR departments. We have international law. But look closer. Machiavelli's mechanics are still the operating system of our world. They have just changed costumes. When a corporation executes a hostile takeover, strips the assets, and fires the workforce to boost stock prices, what is that? That is the economy of violence. Constructive cruelty for the shareholders. When a politician uses optics, smiling for cameras, kissing babies while secretly cutting deals with lobbyists, that is the fox. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Even in your office politics. The manager who takes credit for your work but is so charming that the boss loves him, that is virtù without virtue. That is the lion and the fox in a suit and tie. Machiavelli warns us that the world consists of two types of people, those who understand the game, and those who are played by it. If you refuse to understand these dynamics because they are ugly or immoral, you are not being virtuous. You are being naive. You are disarming yourself in a room full of swords. The prince is not a prescription for how to be. Machiavelli isn't telling you to be a psychopath. He is providing a description of what is. He is handing you a map of the minefield. You can choose to walk through it with your eyes open, or you can close your eyes and hope for the best. But, as Machiavelli would say, hope is not a strategy. Fortune is a river, and you better start building a dam. In the end, what happened to our guide? Niccolò Machiavelli never got his happy ending. He died poor at the age of 58. The Medici never really trusted him. He was buried in the church of Santa Croce, but for centuries his name was spoken in whispers, synonymous with the devil himself. Old Nick. But he left us something more valuable than a kingdom. He gave us the courage to look at the world without illusions, to strip away the ought and look at the is. He taught us that goodness without power is helpless. A prophet who is unarmed will always be destroyed. And that sometimes, to protect what we love, our families, our communities, our values, we must be willing to engage with the darkness. We must learn how to be dangerous. Jordan Peterson often says, a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. That is pure Machiavelli. You don't have to be a prince to use this wisdom. You just have to be awake. You have to recognize the lions and the foxes in your own life. Realism is not pessimism. It is the prerequisite for survival. It is the tool that turns Fortuna into opportunity. Because the game of power is being played all around you, every single day. In the news, at your job, in the streets. The only question Machiavelli asks you is this: are you going to be a player, or are you just going to be a piece? Machiavelli forces us to look in the mirror, and the reflection isn't always pretty. My question for you is this: in your own experience, whether in the corporate world or in politics, have you found it possible to succeed by being truly good? Or is the cunning of the fox always necessary to survive? Share your perspective in the comments below. We are building a community of critical thinkers here at Stratum Logic, and I read every single insight you share. If this analysis gave you a new lens to view the world, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It directly supports our work and helps us bring more deep dives like this to you. Thank you for deep thinking with us.